I'm Rob from Barefoot Gaming, and today we are going to try to steer you in the right direction by showing you the difference between the Thrustmaster and the Logitech series. Let's go! I am going to start by saying that you will notice there are three wheels in front of me. So we've got two by Thrustmaster, one by Logitech. The Logitech is the G29. The G920 is almost identical. There are a couple of differences. Number one, the G29 has the light indicator on the top. The G29 also has the red dial for selecting back and forth, like in different menus, that the G920 does not. And the G29 is for the PS3, PS4, and the PC, whereas the G920 is for Xbox One/PC. And the color codes are a little different, but the actual mechanics of the steering wheel itself are identical. So for all intensive purposes, we are going to be comparing the big brands against each other. Now, if you're new to simulation racing, something I should mention is the fact that they are all self-calibrating. That means when you plug them in to power and USB, they're gonna start spinning on their own and they're going to self-center. So that's important, but all of them do that. All of them also have their own software suite that you can install so you can adjust how much force feedback you get. That's also a big deal. Now, we did all of our testing on default settings. So exactly what you get when you install the drivers, when you plug them in, that's how we compared the actual performance, the noise levels, and etc. Now, an area where they all start differentiating themselves from each other is how they are driven. The T150, for example, is a hybrid system. It uses a helical gear and a belt system. The T300 uses only a belt system, and the G29 uses only a gear system, the helical gear system. Now, if you don't know what a helical gear is, you are not alone, because I had no idea what it was either. When you think of gears, you think of very flat objects turning teeth on each other. What a helical gear is it runs kind of at an angle, and you'll see by the picture that I'm showing right now, this is what a helical gear is. It has much better grip, and it does a much better job actually controlling and is less likely to strip. However, that also makes a difference in noise. Now, what I did to do a comparison for noise levels is I ran them all in the exact same vehicle, on the exact same track, and smashed them into the exact same spot. And I've actually recorded all three, so you can see how much of a difference a belt system, a hybrid system, and just a helical gear system works. The T150 is the loudest of the three. The fact that it's a hybrid and uses a belt doesn't seem to make a difference for noise level. The G29, however, even though it is helical, feels a little notchy when you're driving. So I don't know how to describe it better than notchy, in the sense that it doesn't feel smooth when it's pulling you back and forth. The T150 actually still does probably a better job in feeling smooth, and the T300 buries the other two as far as the smoothness goes. However, if that's not something that's as important to you and you don't mind your arcade racers kind of, playing a little bit looser, then for sure the G29 would be way up there as well. Now, as far as the strength of the force feedback systems, they're all actually pretty good, but they are still different from each other. The T300 does the biggest resistance. The G29 is very, very close. And this actually surprised me, because when I played with the G27, it was super loud and super notchy comparatively. The G27 was still a good wheel, but it was infinitely louder than the G29. And the T150, even though it uses that belt system, it's not as strong as the G29, and it's louder. So those are things you have to take into consideration. Now, something to keep in mind is if they are belt driven, which both of the Thrustmasters are, they both have fans. So they only kick in when they start overheating. But because of the belt system, because of that extra friction, whatever it is, they have the capacity to be louder just based on fan noise alone. Next up, let's talk about build quality, and this is really important to me. Now, as far as feel goes, the T150 feels the cheapest. The fact that it is plastic and rubber as far as what the actual handle is made of, plus when you bend it, it has a little bit of give. Now, I used the T150 for a fair amount of time prior to doing testing on any of these others. This was my original force feedback wheel, and it's tough. It never cracked, it never anything. However, when you compare this to something like the G29 that has a hand-stitched leather covering on the wheel, this just feels infinitely better as far as quality-wise in your hands. The T300, again, is really solid like the G29. However, it is rubber covered instead of the hand-stitched leather. So my preference as far as wheel feel, which is a weird thing to say, is the G29. It feels a little bit better. Next up, let's talk about how many buttons there are on the units themselves. Now, the T150 and the T300 are both sitting at exactly the same number. They both have 12 buttons plus the direction. The G29 has 14, but it also has the roller and the direction pad as well. So they're pretty close, but the G29 wins by a little bit. The G920, I believe, has the same number as the T150 and the T300. Something else of importance that we need to talk about is how many degrees of rotation can these things do. Now, the Thrustmasters both do 1080, and the Logitechs both do 900. And if you don't know what that means, is think of 1.5 turns being at 1080 in one direction, and then 1.5 again from dead center the other direction being 1080. Whereas the Logitech would be 1.25 one direction and 1.25 the other way. So you're actually getting a whole half turn more in the Thrustmasters than you are in the Logitechs. Whether that matters to you, whether you're even utilizing that in the game, is something that you get to decide yourself, but it's important to know. The Thrustmasters do 1080 degree, and the Logitechs both do 900. Two more things I'm going to touch on before we actually get to the pedals that go with these is the shifters themselves. Now, the shifter, I would say the one that feels the best on all three is the G29. It has, as far as the noise level, it's kind of soft, and it's like a brushed stainless. The T150 is the clickiest, and it's just like a painted black thinner metal. Again, I'm not worried about it breaking, but if you are to compare it with the G29, it is of lesser quality. And then the T300, also like a higher click level, but it's a little bit beefier than the T150. So there's that. The last thing I'm going to talk about before we talk about the pedals is how they actually mount to the table. Now, both Thrustmasters mount from the bottom. There is kind of like a claw that comes up from the bottom, and then you crank the center, and that's what creates tightness up against whatever you're mounting them to, assuming you're not using bolts, because all three of these will accept bolts if you're running this on an actual sim rig. What Logitech does is they have two buttons on the top that you turn, and that pulls up the clamps on the bottom. And once you get it tight, you push it down, give it a tiny little bit of a turn, and it holds it in place. That's the difference. Now let's talk about pedals. I'm going to start with the Thrustmaster T150, which again, like I said, is a really solid force feedback wheel, but the Thrustmaster T150 has got the crappiest brake accelerator. This one feels the cheapest. It has a small footprint. Everything is plastic, and the brake is not progressive. It gets a little tighter because I think there's a spring behind it, but it doesn't actually feel like a brake. So this is very much entry level. The nice thing about Thrustmaster that you can't really do with Logitech is you can buy a different pedal set and you can replace it. Also with Thrustmaster, you can replace the wheels on most of them. So keep that in mind. But the T150 has a it's a very cheap feeling pedal set. Plus the size of the base makes it really easy to slide around on the ground. So if you're bolting it to something, that's fine. Otherwise, carpet is almost going to be a recommendation, or you're going to want to use double-sided tape. Next, we're going to talk about the T300 RS pedals. Again, the ones that it comes with. And again, just a little bit of a hint here, we're going from crappiest to best. This one has metal covers on top of the accelerator and the brake. And this one, the brake actually does have resistance. It actually has progressive resistance as you push down. You will notice again though that the footprint is as small as the T150. So I find that frustrating because you're going to have to go through extra steps to make sure that it actually grips to the floor, and you don't want your pedals moving out from underneath you while you're racing. Super frustrating. G29 to G920, What the heck, they did an infinitely better job with their pedal set than the T150 and the T300s. There is no question, everything about this is built better. There are, of course, metal covers on top of metal on black pistons, right? So this again comes with a clutch, which neither the T150 or the T300 RS come with by default. This has a much bigger footprint, which is really important here because, like I said, you don't want it slipping all over the place, and this has more grips. It is less likely to slip all over the place. So this beats these by a long shot, no question. However, Thrustmaster has up their sleeves the T3 PA Pro, and this is their granddaddy of their brake accelerator clutch kit. This thing is solid metal all the way through. Plus, you can also mount this NASCAR style where the brake and the accelerator and the clutch sit from the top instead of from the bottom. All you have to do is you take the metal plating and you put it on the other side. You'll have to adjust all your settings in game, but it is another option. Here there are multiple settings, again, for progressive brakes. This set feels the best by a long shot, but you don't get this with any of the base model Thrustmaster kits. Logitech gives you a good one with their G29 and their G920s, but you can't upgrade it later. And all you have to do to upgrade on a Thrustmaster is unplug it, plug the new jack into the back, and Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. So you kind of have to decide how far you want to go on all this. And honestly, all of these are good value. If you don't have a force feedback wheel, even stepping in with the T150 or a Logitech G27, if you can pick one up used, you are going to be miles ahead of using anything like a gamepad. This puts you into actual gameplay. However, hopefully I've been able to help you distinguish which have strong points and which have weak points. The T150, I would say, is a good entry-level force feedback wheel and pedal set. Even though their pedals are weak, that's something you can always upgrade later. The G920 and the G29s are a nice premium set, but I know for myself, at the end of the day, I went Thrustmaster. I went Thrustmaster because I like the feel of the belt. I like the feel of the direct, and I don't like that notchy feel. The G29 wasn't bad, but the T300 did a better job. And if price is not an object and you can go with the T3PA, you have the best of all the worlds. Now I know I'm not comparing this to Fnatic, I'm not comparing this to the other guys, I am just looking at Thrustmaster versus Logitech, and my goal here is hopefully I have helped you understand a little bit more about some of this racing hardware, and you guys can make up your own mind. But if you have questions, I will help you any way I can. Leave comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. You'll notice that I was racing on the H6. That thing is, I don't care which one I strap to this, it is just fun to race. And honestly, if budget is an issue, as long as you're getting in at the force feedback level, you're gonna have fun. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for watching another one of the Barefoot Gaming, Barefoot Racing reviews. We will see you again really soon. Next month, I'm hoping to put something out with some flight sims, and we want to see how the flight sim works in the full motion simulator. That is it. I will talk to you again real soon. See ya.